Today I'm going to introduce a vital topic that it's important for us to work out and live in, which is the topic and the biblical theme of hospitality. And this is such an important value for us to live out as believers, filled with the Holy Spirit. And so as we're going to journey through some scriptures together, we'll also look at some misconceptions to avoid, and let's dive in together. And so the first question that I want to ask us, what is biblical hospitality? We've all got different ideas of that word hospitality. We think of the hospitality industry, but biblical hospitality is nothing like that. It's got nothing to do with putting on a fancy show or a fancy meal. It's something so different. And I'd like us to start by looking at a scripture in 1 Peter. It's in 1 Peter 4, verse 8 to 9, and I'd like us to read it together. And it says, "Above all, keep loving one another earnestly, since love covers a multitude of sins. Show hospitality to one another without grumbling." And here what the scripture does is, if we look carefully, it links up love with hospitality. There's this idea that the two are intertwined. And in fact, the very word hospitality in the Greek means the love of strangers, or to love strangers. And so practically speaking, hospitality is when we're able to draw people into our lives, draw them into our home, and show them the love of God, often in very practical ways. Specifically, as we look at the Old Testament and the New Testament, which we're going to be doing now, before we dive into the scripture, I just want to share personally that when I was a young Christian, I was 18, I'd been saved probably about 8-9 months. I was new in the local church I was part of. I was being discipled in just as this up and coming young believer. And where I learned to experience the love of God was through a couple that were leaders in the church that I was part of in Port Elizabeth. And they very much just opened up their home to me. I would visit them after class, after my lectures at university, and just got to know them, got to see how the husband treated his wife, treated his kids, the way they interacted with one another. And I'd never seen that before. And I would have been robbed of this wonderful opportunity to see the love of God in action if I was not in their home. And so biblical hospitality is, in a sense, intricately linked with discipleship. And so what we're speaking about is really the kind of discipleship that brings people through into more of the Lord and into growing in God. And what's interesting is that the rabbis in the Old Testament or in the Jewish culture, for them, hospitality was a very important qualification actually to be a leader. And there's an old rabbi saying, that in order to be a rabbi or qualify as a rabbi, you needed to, number one, be a scholar of the scriptures. You needed to know the scriptures and know how to teach the scriptures. But also, number two, you needed to be hospitable. And the saying goes that a rabbi had to have 4 doors to their house. They had to have a door facing the north, facing the south, facing the east and the west. In other words, that from every direction, they would need to welcome people, which is so vital. And specifically, as we look at the Old Testament, we see that God takes this value of hospitality and he codifies it into the law. And we see a scripture like in Leviticus 19, verse 33 to 34. And let's read it together. It says, "When a stranger sojourns with you in your land, or journeys with you in your land, you shall do him no wrong. You shall treat the stranger who sojourns with you as the native among you. You shall love him as yourself, for you were strangers in the land of Egypt. I am the Lord your God." And so God here is giving a very strong command to love the strangers among them and to draw them into their lives and not to leave them as outcasts. So why did God want the people to practice hospitality, or his people to practice hospitality? And the reason he gives at the end of this verse, he says, "For you are strangers in the land, and I am the Lord your God." In other words, God himself had shown kindness and mercy to them. He had loved them when they were outsiders, and he had drawn them in. He had given them a land, and he had said, "This is yours, come, I want to share my inheritance with you." And so in the same way, he says, as you have been treated, will you treat others the same way, and love is the way that you have been loved. And we find that in the New Testament, this theme of hospitality from the Old to the New, that God puts such a premium on hospitality that one of the basic qualifications to be an elder in the church, a pastor in the church, if you look at the list in 1 Timothy 3, is to be hospitable. In other words, they had to open up their hearts and open up their homes to others. And if you think that this was a standard that was only given to leaders or elders in the church, that's not true at all, because that standard in 1 Timothy 3 is actually a very basic list. In other words, the elders were meant to model something that we're all living in. For example, one of the qualifications was temperate. Another one was managing your household well. Another one was not given too much wine. So clearly, it's not saying that elders must be sober and the rest of us can get drunk. He's saying here that actually elders just simply set a model for us to follow, an example for us to follow. And we find this thread, as I mentioned earlier, in 1 Peter, which is written to all believers, to be hospitable. And then another scripture that we find, like in Romans 12, verse 13, which says, contribute to the needs of the saints, again, very practical, and seek to show hospitality. And so here's this important principle that Jesus teaches us, is that we to then look and seek, we to be front-footed about it, and to actually intentionally open up our lives and our homes to one another. There's a fascinating scripture in Matthew 10, verse 40 to 42, where Jesus says this, and he says, whoever receives you receives me, and whoever receives me receives him who sent me. The one who receives a prophet because he is a prophet receives a prophet's reward, and the one who receives a righteous person because he is a righteous person will receive a righteous person's reward. And whoever gives one of these little ones even a cup of cold water, because he is a disciple, truly I say to you, he will by no means lose his reward. What a fascinating piece of scripture. And Jesus, in many aspects here, is speaking about the art of hospitality. And what he's doing is making it something deeply spiritual, deeply, profoundly God-centered, because he says that if you receive someone, it's as if you're receiving me. When you receive someone into your home, it's as if you're receiving Jesus himself. How profound is that? That means it's part of our worship to God because it's centered upon the person of Jesus. So as we look at these things, clearly that there is a blessing attached, that when we receive those into our homes, into our lives, there's actually, God says, but if you receive like that, how much more won't you be blessed? How much more won't you as you give of yourself, receive some kind of reward? Isn't that wonderful? Now, some of you might object to this and say, but Mike, I can't afford to show hospitality. I can't afford to entertain people in my home. But we're not speaking here about entertainment or the kind of hospitality that I mentioned in the beginning, which is this worldly hospitality. That's very different. Here we're speaking about ways to host, which is not entertainment. And what I want to do is end our kind of short topic together by giving you 6 ways to host instead of to entertain. These are practical things that I picked up and have learned over the years, and I trust that it helps you. So let's go through them together. Number 1 is that when we host, we keep things simple and informal. That means if you're having someone over into your home, if you have a home, to be able to do that, you're not going to get all fancy and try and create this 3-course meal. You're going to keep it as simple as possible and not going to be stuck in the kitchen, so that you can actually spend time with the people who are in your space. Number 2, let others bring something. And so if you're inviting someone into your space or someone into your home, ask them to bring something with. We do this all the time. We'll say, well, we'll provide the cutlery and you provide the food. No, we don't do that. We say things like, well, we'll provide the main course and you provide the pudding, and bring a drink along with you. And it's because we understand that we're doing life together. We're not simply going to be entertaining them as per se. Thirdly, I want to say, use your regular cutlery. Don't try and put out the fancy stuff. And I know that many of you watching this would want to give of your best and, give people an experience they wouldn't want to miss. And if that's the case and you feel the Lord leading you to do that, then, that's fine. But when we open up our home a lot, and because we want to have this kind of discipleship where we're doing coffee table or dinner table Christianity, it's so important that people see who we are. And that involves giving them the normal cutlery. I know one of my good friends that I spent time with, for me, it was a badge of honor, in a sense of having having a level of friendship with him that I felt that, he let his guard down because he gave me one of his cups that had a deep chip and crack in it. And then I knew, man, I'm part of this family because he didn't give me his best. And in the same way, we show people who we are by just using our regular informal stuff. Number 4, ask for help. And so often if we'd eat together, for example, we would then clean up and I'd ask the guys, hey, come, let's wash the dishes together. Or they would want to offer, what can I do to help? So rather than all the burden being placed on the hosts, you can actually share the load and it helps everyone involved. And if someone is offended by that, if you say, hey guys, let's all chip in together, it's great chances to get to know each other and as you're washing dishes. And if someone's offended by that, well, that's a wonderful opportunity to help them and say, this is part of the way we do life together. Won't you join us? 5th one, this is so important, is that if you have children, prepare the kids and tell the kids that you've got some friends coming around or new people coming around and prepare them for that. And what I would do is I wouldn't banish them to the bedroom or make them sit on their own somewhere. What we do as a family, and this is the way that we've grown up, is we very much have included them into doing life with people. They sit at the table with us. And when we get to hear each other's stories, our kids have grown up hearing stories, salvation stories, life stories from individuals from different walks of life. And it's enriched them and enriched us in the process. And so prepare the kids for that. Sometimes it's time for them to go off and play, but where you can, involve them in the hosting. And then lastly, pray. Something we do is, we're not just getting together as a social visit. As I mentioned earlier, we're receiving something of even Jesus himself as we receive people. And ask the Lord, say, Lord, as we've got friends or folk coming in or strangers coming in, Lord, would you give me a heart to be like you? Would you give me a generous heart to host? And that people would experience something of your grace and something of your presence even as they come into my space. And so in closing, I want to say that this is a deep value of ours. This is the way that we would live out New Testament Christianity. It's a way that we really get to love one another. And I want to encourage you to make it your aim to seek to show hospitality and to contribute to the needs of the saints. Amen.